All right, guys. Just a quick, simple message, but I do believe this message is for somebody, and I hope whoever needs it grabs a hold of it and grabs on pretty tight. The name of this message is going to be, Hi, my name is Visited. My name is Visited. And you might be thinking, what? What kind of a title is that? Who says their name is visited? What kind of a name is visited? Well, I'm using that to say something, to get a point across. Hi, my name is Visited. Before I explain it, let me just tell you what this message is about real quick. Whoever this is for, maybe you're somebody who God has put you or tried to put you in someone's life. And the reason that He has put you there is to help them in some kind of a way, to assist them in some kind of a way. Maybe He puts you in someone's life to be a good friend to them. Maybe He's put you into their life to be almost like a business partner, like an assistant in the workplace. Or maybe He's put somebody in your life to be a spouse, a husband or a wife, something like that. And maybe this person that you're supposed to have this special connection with, this special relationship with, maybe you view that person as a mighty person in God, or someone that God has some type of favor for. And it just seems like they're awesome, they're great, they got it all together. And then you stand back and you look at yourself and you think to yourself, what could I possibly offer? What do I have to offer this person to assist them? Yeah, it seems like God is trying to bring us together to have us work together as a team, but I just don't see it. There's just something about me that just doesn't seem to fit into this mold. I don't feel good enough. And the more I step back and try to see the big picture, it really very much seems as though God could have picked someone else to be a better person for this position. There are other people who seem to be quite a bit more qualified for this than I am. I just don't feel like I can play this role, that I can play out this part. I just don't feel like I have much to offer. I'm just not special enough. And I don't know what I could possibly do to make this person's life better or easier. I just don't know what to do. I feel so unworthy of this position, of this offer. And I just feel like I have to run from it almost. I feel like I have to back down because it just seems like the competition is heavy the more that I look around. I just don't know what I have to bring to the table. And that's what this message is about. That's who this message is for. Maybe that's how you're feeling. And I just want to say that if that's how you feel, this message may just be for you, and you should consider this message a visitation almost from God. Why do I say that? Well, there's this saying that you hear a lot in ministry. You'll hear people say, I am redeemed. And yes, they mean redeemed by Jesus, the blood of Jesus, what He's done for us on the cross. And that's true. But a lot of times they'll say it with a capital R, almost as if they're saying that's what their name is. And in fact, there will be people that will go as far as to say, if anybody asks me who I am or what my name is, I will tell them I am redeemed, almost as if they're saying that's their name. I'm redeemed. I'm so redeemed by Jesus that you might as well act like redeemed is my name. You might as well just say it with a capital R. I am redeemed. And so what I want to say to those of you who this message may be for, if you just feel so unworthy to do this thing that God has for you to do, it's time for you to say, I am visited. Not just I am redeemed, but I am visited, almost as if visited is your name. And what I want to do is I want to share some characters in the Bible and some things that they've gone through. And we'll see that a change came about them. And during this change, it was during a time that they were visited by God. God came to visit them, to help them out, to encourage them, to give them a word. And so that's what this message is about. Because there are some of you who not only do you need to realize that right now you're being visited, you are visited, but through you being visited, other people will be redeemed. Because there are people that will stand back and look at your story and see how you went from feeling like a nobody to feeling like a somebody in Christ and say, well, if God can do that for them, maybe God can do it for me. Maybe this Jesus person that he or she talks about changing their life will do that for me. So by you becoming visited, someone else may become redeemed. So just like how you will say, my name is visited, they will be able to eventually in turn say, I am redeemed. I've given my life over to Christ and now I'm seeing him do things for me. And so that's what this message is going to be about. So let's just jump right in and let's look at Genesis chapter 18. That's where I'm going to start at. Genesis chapter 18, starting at verse 11. It says this, now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. In the last message I did, I was reading from this particular chapter, but my focus was on Abraham. Well, in this particular sermon, I'm reading from here again just a little bit, but here my focus is on Sarah, the wife of Abraham. And let me just go ahead and say this. I find it funny that the three characters I'm really focused on in this sermon are characters named Sarah, Hannah, and Anna. They all rhyme. I just thought that was kind of cool how that's playing out. But anyway, focused on Sarah here. Sarah here is well on up in her age, past the point of life to be able to conceive. But God has made it known, no, she will bear a child one day. I'm going to make sure that she does bear Abraham a son. And Sarah just has a hard time believing that. But God is saying, is there anything too hard for me? I mean, sure, if you were going to do that on your own, it'd be kind of a hard task because of your age. But I can make a way out of no way. Nothing is too hard for me. I am the Lord. That was the point he was trying to get across. And so I'm talking to some people right now who may be some Sarahs. Maybe you stand back and you look at this Abraham that you're attached to and you're looking at him or her and you're thinking, you know, they've really got it going on. I know God has a lot in store for this person and I'm supposed to be by their side, but I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that because I can't even do a simple thing like bear a child and everybody else is doing it. Or whatever it is that you're having an issue with. You're thinking, you know, there's a simple thing, a simple task that others around me seem to be able to do, and I might not be able to do what others can. I don't know why I have been honored with this position of being a wife of Abraham. I just don't understand. What do I have to bring to the table? And so God steps in and says, don't worry, I have a plan for you. And maybe there are some of you out there that you just doubt it. You just don't understand why you. I don't know how to make this play out. But it's not about you and your abilities. It's not about what you're equipped with. It's like the saying goes, God doesn't call the equipped, he calls the called. You know, sometimes he just calls you just because you're available, just because he can. And it's not about what you can or can't do always. A lot of times it's just about what God can do in you and through you if you would but just let him, if you would simply be an open vessel for him. So whoever I'm talking to, maybe you just feel like Sarah. Maybe you feel too old or too young. Maybe you feel like there's just something about your age that would hold you back from doing what God has for you to do. Maybe you just think I'm too tall or too short, too black, too white, too fat, too skinny, too this, too that. But it's not about any of that. God has it in the bag. And just to prove this point, let's back up just a little bit. And I'm going to read a little bit of something that I read in the last sermon, but there's something extra I want to read. But starting back up, just backing up to verse 1 in this same chapter, it says, "And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do, as thou hast said." And so we see Abraham tending to these men, showing them hospitality, wanting them to relax, wanting them to have water and food. And it seems like Abraham's going to do all this stuff. And I stopped there after verse 5. But now let's look at what verse 6 says. It says, "And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth." So even though Abraham's all like, okay, I got this, his first instinct is to go to his wife and have her assist him in something. So there's already importance to Sarah, but she's overlooking the importances, and she's overlooking the things that she can do because she's too busy being concerned about what she feels she can't do, even though God has already put the point out there that he's going to make sure in the long run that she can do the thing that right now she can't do. And so it's just about her having faith, having patience, and saying, okay, Lord, I believe you. In the meantime, let me just do whatever it is that I can do to help Abraham, to assist him. And that right there is what you all should keep in mind, whoever needs this message. So now let's skip on over to chapter 21, still in Genesis, just going over a few chapters. And look at what the first verse says. It says, "And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken." So God, of course, kept his promise. Verse 2 said, "For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age." So we got Abraham and Sarah. There's like a 10-year gap between them. Abraham's 100 years old, Sarah's 90. But regardless of the 10-year gap in their age, regardless of the fact that they're both up in age, they're still together regardless of that, and they're still together regardless of the fact that up until this point, Sarah had not conceived. And that right there could have been something that had put the relationship on the rocks, because if you pay attention to the Old Testament, you'll notice that it's a big deal for women to want to birth children for their husbands. It was a big deal to them, and if any of them were barren and couldn't conceive, they would just be heartbroken. They would be distraught. They would feel like their husband would not love them anymore if they couldn't at least bear at least one child. I mean, we saw how it played out with Rachel and Leah, the sisters. They were both married to Jacob. Jacob, he really wanted Rachel. That was the one he loved. That was the one that he found most beautiful. And so it said that when the Lord saw how much Leah was not loved, how much she was hated, he opened up her womb, even though Rachel, the one that was loved by Jacob, was still barren. And so Leah ended up getting it in her mind that as long as she continued to conceive and give birth, that eventually Jacob would start to love her more than Rachel, because even though Rachel was so beautiful, she was not going to be producing him any children. So that was just the mindset that women had. Well, if I can just bear him some children, he'll love me for sure. Then for sure he won't leave. So we see how this is something that, like I said, could have put their relationship on the rocks. But regardless of the 10-year difference in age, regardless of the fact that she's on up in age to a point where it seemed impossible for her to bear children, Abraham still was standing by her side, and sure enough, God pays her a visit. And she has that child. She has been visited. Another name for her would be visited. And so we see that, but I also want to point out the fact that we can see that Sarah really reverences Abraham, really thinks something of Abraham, and thinks not much of herself. Because if you notice in that last verse I read, she could have said, who would have thought that I would have done this? Who would have came to me, Sarah, and said, you bared a child. I can't believe this. She doesn't say that. Instead, she says, who would have said to Abraham, your wife Sarah has conceived at this old age? So she's not even considering herself. She's considering what people would think to say to Abraham about her. So we see that there. We see just how much she thinks something of him, but not much of herself. And that's what God has been trying to get her to see, that there is importance to her. And so that's something that you, the listener, must understand as well. Now, moving to 1 Samuel chapter 1, starting right here at the beginning, it says, now there was a certain man of Ramathaim, that's a long word, of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Toho, the son of Zuph, and Ephrathite. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. So we see something that starts out similar to what I said about Rachel, Leah, and Jacob. We have this guy Elkanah. He has 2 wives, one named Peninnah and one named Hannah. Peninnah is the one that's bearing the children, but you have Hannah, who has not had any children. She's been barren up until this point. Verse 3. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord has shut up her womb. So we see Elkanah, yes, he gives out portions, he gives out rations to the wife that's bearing children and her children, but he still goes and gives a worthy portion to Hannah because he loves her. So he's different from Jacob. He doesn't have this mindset of, well, I'm going to love this one so much more than the other. He still loves Hannah. She is worthy in his eyes. She's still worthy of a portion in his eyes. And so he's not concerned about trying to have Hannah compete with others to feel love. Verse 6, and her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then said Elkanah her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou, and why eatest thou not, and why is thy heart grieved, and not I better to thee than 10 sons? So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord and wept. I'm just going to stop there and just explain what's going on. She was sad, she was upset, she was probably trying to compete with the other wife. And she's down and out, doesn't want to eat, sad, crying. And Elkanah talks to her and says, why are you crying? Why are you sad? Why is your heart grieved? Am I not good enough for you? Am I not better than 10 sons? And so I want to pause and say this to somebody out there. Maybe you're kind of like Sarah, and you're also kind of like Hannah, and you're down and out. You feel down on your luck, you feel sad, you feel unworthy because of feeling like you can't complete this task or this role, not feeling good enough. But the whole time you're doing that, the whole time you're feeling this way, the whole time you're taking steps away from and neglecting the Abraham or the Elkanah that's supposed to be in your life, did you not stop to think for a second that maybe you might be making that Abraham or that Elkanah sad as well? Did you not stop to think that maybe they're not concerned about how much you can do and about how much you compare to other people? That they're not concerned about you trying to compete with others. They don't want you to compete. They just want you to be you because they will love you for you. And so when you try to take steps back and you're hiding in your corner, having your pity party, maybe your Abraham or your Elkanah is sad because they feel like you're leaving them hanging. They're standing there with arms wide open, ready for you, but you just keep taking those steps back. So you're sad, but now you're making them sad. That's something to take into consideration. That the more you run and the more you have your pity party and the more you keep staying in this pit of depression, all you're doing is hurting the one that you think you're actually helping by running away. And so after Elkanah explains this to her, we see that she gets up and she goes and worships. And what ends up happening is she's crying out to the Lord. She's trying to open up more to the Lord about this. And in the process, there's even a priest that's like, are you drunk? What's wrong with you? What's going on? And she has to explain, no, I'm not drunk. I'm just weeping before the Lord. I'm making my petition known to him. And she continues with what she has going on. She gets to a point where she's not concerned about what anybody thinks. She's just focused on opening herself up to God and worshiping him and seeking his will. And that's where you should be at right now. You should be trying to visit with God on this and trying to open yourself up to him, because it's through her opening herself up more to him and to his will about her life, it causes him to visit her and open up her womb. And what ends up happening is she ends up having a child after all, the child Samuel. And then when you skip over to the next chapter, chapter 21, chapter 2, when you look at verse 21, it says, and the Lord visited Hannah so that she conceived and bare 3 sons and 2 daughters, and the child Samuel grew before the Lord. So again, she opens up to him, and God opens up to her. She pays him a visit, And he pays her a little visit and helps her out in what she feels like is lacking in her life. She's more concerned about him and the will that he has for her life than she is about trying to compete with everyone and everything around her. And so now, let's go to Luke. I'm getting close to wrapping this up. Don't worry. Luke chapter 2, we'll start at verse 36. It says this, talking about Anna now, it says, "And there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Aser. She was of a great age and had lived with a husband 7 years from her virginity. And she was a widow of about 84 years, which departed not from the temple, but served God with fasting and prayers night and day. And she coming in that instant gave thanks likewise unto the Lord, and spoke of him to all them that looked for redemption in Jerusalem." That's it. Let me help you see the point that I just made there. A lot of times in the Bible, you come across some characters, and sometimes it seems like almost that whole book will be about that character. Maybe just a chapter or a simple story will be all about a character, or they'll be the main character of that story. But every now and then you come across a character where the Bible only says a verse or two, or maybe, 3 or 4 verses about a person, and then it just moves right along. And to some people, it could seem like pointless, like a waste of time of even mentioning that person. And you could almost say this about Anna because it only shows, a few verses talking about her, and what it says about her doesn't necessarily seem special to some. It just says, she was married for a bit, then she became a widow, but then she spent time in the temple worshiping and basically pointing the Lord out to people who are seeking redemption. And that's pretty much it. You could say it's pretty bland all the way up to the point of her helping people seek redemption in the Lord. But then you could also turn around and say, well, then again, this is the New Testament and this is the Gospels. And so there are plenty of people who are trying to lead people to God and trying to lead people to Jesus. You got Jesus' disciples, and then those disciples end up getting disciples and people becoming apostles and blah, 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 blah. So what's so special about this one moment talking about this one person? That's how some people may feel. But that's just it. The writer still felt the need to go ahead and mention this person anyway, even if they only had a few verses to really say anything about her. It's still important. And so I want to say that to you. Maybe you're feeling like a Sarah, a Hannah, or an Anna. You feel like there's just very little to you. As if someone wanted to write some stuff down about you, they would only have just a few paragraphs of things to say. Kind of like how this writer only had a few verses of stuff to say about Anna here. But that's irrelevant. She still served a purpose. And the purpose she served was awesome. She was leading people to their, redemption. There we are with that word again. Redeemed, redemption. And so she has spent time in the Lord, spent time in the temple, praising and worshiping God, seeking God, kind of like how we saw Anna did. So she spends time visiting with the Lord. And so you could say Anna's other name is visited, just like how you could say that with Sarah and Hannah. And through her being visited, because she visits the Lord, she helps other people become redeemed. Going back to what I said at the beginning of this sermon. So we see that it's not something that's just little and simple and unimportant. It's very important. Just like in the last sermon I said, gifts of God. Sometimes it's the little blessings that actually are the bigger blessings. But we continue to ignore them and overlook them. It's time to look at the things that seem simple and realize just how big and how important they really are. And so I hope that that's an encouraging word for you. I hope that It's something that's simple but straight to the point but still helps you. But if that's not enough, if you need just a one more little nudge, go to Genesis one more time. Let's look at chapter 2, and I'm just going to point out a couple of verses. Genesis chapter 2, first verse I want to look at is verse 18, that says this, "And the Lord said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him." This is after he's created Adam. And he's saying, he needs a helper. It's not good for man to be alone. And so what I want to say to you that are the Sarahs, the Hannahs, and the Annas, listen to me very closely. You must understand that maybe it's not all about what you can or can't do after all. Maybe he's putting you into someone's life so that they don't have to be alone and so that you don't have to be alone. Maybe there are things that y'all have in common, even though it may seem like you don't have much in common. But once the bonding happens, once the bonding starts, you will see that there are things there, things that you have in common that will help you guys have some relief together in knowing that y'all understand each other. It's simply about not being alone, about having that helper, that help me. God makes it clear it's not good to be alone. And so the more we run, the more we detach from one another, the more we cause each other grief for simply causing one another to be alone. And so now finally the last verse I want to look at. We see what happens. We know what happens after that. God starts creating those animals. Adam can't find that perfect helper, but then he creates Eve. And look at what Adam says about Eve. He says this in verse 23. It says, "And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Adam was excited about Eve simply because she was bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. In other words, he was just happy to have someone like him, someone that could understand. In other words, there was something about her presence that brought him joy. And maybe that's what it is for you. Maybe God is trying to put you in someone's life simply because there's something about you. There's something about your presence that will just bring them joy and peace and comfort. Maybe there's something about you specifically and about your presence that will be such a blessing, such a gift of God to that person, to that Adam, to that Abraham, to that Elkanah. Maybe that's all there is to it. Maybe there's just something that he's placed inside of you that when you walk in the room, you just light up. And it will make that person's day so much brighter just because your presence were there. Just because your bones and your flesh was there. It just makes their life so much easier and so much more of a blessing to have you around, regardless of what you feel like you can or can't do. There's just something about you. So with that said, I hope that I've said what needs to be said. And I'm just going to pray us out and just hope that this message reaches whoever it needs to reach. Lord, I thank you for another time to minister another word. Lord, I pray that whoever needs to hear this message hears it, that they grab a hold of it, that they cleave to it, just like how Adam and Eve would cleave to one another. Lord, it's important that your people understand their worth, that they understand that they are worthy of a portion, just like Hannah was. Just because it seems like they can't do this or can't do that is irrelevant. It's about what they allow you to do in them and through them. Lord, I give you the praise, glory, and honor. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.